All right, kiddos, let's begin. Your goal for today, please write on the top. I can subtract integers. I can subtract integers right at the top. We're going to follow kind of the same format as we did yesterday. We'll start off with the number line, understand in which direction we are going, and then we'll move into to the easier methods. Okay? So you'll learn two different ways today, and I can just promise you again, you guys could probably predict what the homework quiz is going to be tomorrow. It's going to be much of the same. Okay? In which direction shall you go in different situations, and give me an example. Okay? So, we're going to start off the same question we did yesterday. The only difference is, what happens when we subtract a positive number? Okay? We can start off very simply, and just so you know, I have this on. I am creating a video so you can go back and watch. Okay? So this will all be available for you. If you don't get all the notes tonight or today in class, we'll be able to go back. There's going to be a little bit of writing that we're going to have to do. I got a little wordy at times. So if you have to go back and reread it and write things down, that'll be available for you, and I'll show you where that is. Hopefully I'll have that all uploaded and on my webpage before you leave here today. Okay? All right. It's been a while since I've done this, so hopefully I remember how to do it. But I'll have at least one video. I'll figure it out by the third time I go through this today. Okay? All right. So what happens when we subtract a positive number? We'll start off with the easiest one, something we've been doing for quite a while. 4 subtract 3. That's subtracting a positive number. Is that right? Everybody see that? Keep in mind, the first number, when we're dealing with this and we're talking about this method, the first number is where we start. Okay? So I'm just going to put in 0 right here, and I'm starting at 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. There it is. And we're going to subtract a positive 3. So what happens when we subtract a positive 3? We move to the left. Okay? So we move 1, 2, 3. Our answer ends up at 1. So what happens when we subtract a positive number? We move it to the left. Okay? In other words, we are getting smaller from where we started. Everybody okay with that? I do need all Chromebooks down for right now. Okay? And soon, I don't know, maybe soon we'll start using our Google Docs and we'll be able to type this information. For those of you that are efficient typers, okay? Some of you are more efficient writers than you are typers. Some of you are the opposite way. And as long as we're writing down those notes, you guys, do you have access to your Google accounts at home? Well, isn't that cool? So then you could study your own notes, right? Okay, so maybe we'll get to that eventually. All right? Now, I do want to go over a couple more examples for us, because that's, you know, we covered like first grade math right there, right? Okay? But the nice thing about math that we've talked about is once we know a rule, the rules never change. They never change. That's a great thing. All right? So let's talk about, we did a positive, subtract a positive. What happens when we go with a negative and we subtract a positive? So we have a negative 3 and we subtract a positive 4. What happens? The same thing is true. Which direction are we going to go? Left. In fact, we're going to end up being smaller than this negative 3, right? How many units smaller are we going to be than negative 3? 4 units smaller. So the answer is negative 7. I want to show it on the number line. We start off at 1, 2. We start off at negative 3. And we know that we are subtracting 4. All right? We subtract 4. We move 4 to the left. We talked about subtracting positives. 1, 2, 3, 4. We put it down, and that should be at negative 7. All right? Some of you already know easier rules but let's make sure that we understand why those rules work. Does that make sense? We'll be talking about sign switching a little bit later. Some of you might be efficient sign switchers. We're going to try and prove today why why sign switching works. Okay, everybody okay with that? And it doesn't matter, I guess I probably won't go over any more examples. I mean, I could go with a smaller negative number and subtract another number, but I don't think it's necessary. We just need to know that subtracting a positive, we move to the left. Everybody got that? Okay, our answer will become smaller. All right, so now, opposites are so important when we talk about this. If subtracting a positive, we move to the left, what do you think happens when we subtract negatives? What's that? We move to the right, okay? Now, subtracting a negative. Think about this. All right, I'm going to give you two situations. All right? First situation we're going to start with is at the bus stop, okay? So Mr. Rice, he's sitting at the bus stop, all right? And it just got done raining. It rained last night, right? Did it rain here? Last night, was it wet? It's right. Okay, so it was. We're going to pretend that it rained a whole lot more, okay? And I'm going to use just a real life situation. We're going to talk about how subtracting negatives is kind of a good thing for us. In other words, we're going to get bigger, okay? So Mr. Rice, he's sitting at the bus stop. He's waiting for the bus patiently. In front of him is a large puddle. And Mr. Martin, who is running late to get to school, drives right by Mr. Rice, waves to him, and doesn't realize the puddle that's right in front of Mr. Rice. He hits that puddle, and Mr. Rice gets his second shower of the day. Only this one is full of dirt. Okay? He's all wet. His hairdo's gone. Okay? And would you agree that that's a bad, like, negative thing? Right? Now, what happens if I actually had the power? And I don't. I wish I did. But what happens if I said, I can take away that bad thing? In other words, we could back up and say, I'm going to take that away. Would Mr. Rice kind of like that? If we could take away the fact that he got his second shower of the day, this one of the dirt variety, would that be a good thing? Okay, so subtracting negatives. Now here's even better, and I'm still waiting for a bank to do this for me. All right, I would love the bank to call me up. Okay, I think it's Fannie Mae. It is Fannie Mae. I'd love for them to say, you know what, Mr. Martin, we want to take away your student loans. You no longer have to pay them. We're going to take away the money that you owe. So instead of having to pay, we'll say $400 a month for your student loans, you now have to pay $0. Wouldn't that be a cool thing? I'm still waiting to find that bank. And if you find that bank, let me know. Okay? If they will take away negatives, that's a good thing for us, right? Yeah? Everybody make sense of that? So subtracting negatives, it actually increases things for us. Okay? So let's just give a simple example. If we owe $4, okay? So let's say it's a negative $4. Okay? So you borrowed $4 from a friend. They say, you know what? If you know what? You don't have to pay me all $4 back. Okay? I'm going to take away $2 that you owe me. Okay? So you don't have to pay 2 of the dollars that you owe me. How much do you owe them then? 2. Okay? Do you see how instead of just subtracting a positive, if we did that, we'd owe 6. But subtracting a negative, we actually owe -2. Or I should have put the negative first. Does that make sense? So we are moving to the right. That's what subtracting negatives do. Now we have to go over a few examples of these to show it on the number line. So I'm going to do that right now. So if we're at -4, 1, 2, 3, 4. We're at a -4. And this time we're going to subtract a negative 2. We would then move 2 to the 1, 2, and we'd be at negative 2. Does that make sense? Okay. So now we could say subtracting a negative is almost like what? Adding a positive, isn't it? And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Okay. Here's the hardest one, and I'm still trying to come up with a good analogy for this. Okay. If you could think of one, that'd be great. When we start with a positive number, so let's say we start with 5 and we subtract a negative 4. I'll put in my parentheses there. What happens when we subtract a negative 4? Yeah, it's going to be 9 because we have to move how many units? We have to move 4 units, but we're moving 4 units to which way because we're subtracting negatives? To the right. So that looks like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Where are we starting again? 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in this case, we're subtracting a negative 4. So I need to use this. And subtracting a positive, we move to the left. So subtracting a negative, we have to do the opposite. We move to the right. 1, 2, 3, 4. We end up at 9. We okay with that? Hello? Okay. All right. I got to take away everything for my next class. So, could we use the number line to determine the answer? I'm going to give you a few moments to do those 4 problems right now. All right. 5 subtract a negative 3. In which direction are we going? We getting bigger or are we getting smaller? Bigger. We're going to move to the right, right? So that means when we subtract negatives, we move to the right. How many units are we going to move to the right? 3. Where are we starting? Starting at 5, we're moving 3 to the right. Where do we end up? Very good. Very good. Awesome. Awesome. All right, next one. Negative 8 subtract 6. In which direction are we going? To the left. Okay. Why are we moving to the left? We're subtracting a positive. We've been doing that for quite a while, and we always get smaller, don't we? So we're starting at negative 8. We're moving 6 to the left. Where do we end up? Negative 14. Very good. Okay. So you don't actually have to use a number line. We can probably do a lot of these in our head, right? Right? All right. So, by the way, can anybody give me a situation where we'd be down 8 and then we'd lose another 6? Yeah. Well, let's use the numbers though up here. All right. Okay. Okay. So what would this negative 8 represent? Okay, so if we start off, we owe $8, and then what happens? Okay, so we're borrowing another $6. Don't you wish you had one of those credit cards? I call them plastic fantastic. All right, you slide it through. You don't have to pay a thing, and you just essentially, yeah, you don't have the money, or you're not paying for it right now. You pay for it later on. Okay, so you would owe a grand total of $14. Okay, I heard someone say football. Can you tell me what happens? You lost 8 yards in the first play. Then what happens? Then we lost 6 more. How many total yards did we lose? 14. We okay with that? All right. Negative 6, subtract a negative 7. What happens when we subtract a negative? We move to the right. We move to the right, right? Where are we starting? We start at negative 6. We move to the right how many units? Where are we ending up? Positive 1. Very good. All right. Now both the numbers are positive here. But what happens? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, because we're subtracting more than what we started with, right? Okay, so where are we actually at? -7, okay? Classic example. Hopefully this never happens to you. You have $5 in your bank account. You go to your favorite convenience store and buy something for $12. How much do you now have in your bank account? -7. Hopefully it never happens to you. Because guess what? You're going to owe more than -7. The bank will tell you, for borrowing our money, you also owe an additional fee. Yeah. 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 8,000 spent it all on one item. Well, it happens. It happens. Okay. I'm going to erase that real quickly. And, oh, here's, there we go. Again, I can subtract integers. By the way, integers are what? Say it again. Positive and negative numbers, okay? And yes, whole number. We'll get into the positive and negative rational numbers. You guys are experiencing that a little bit with your IXL, but we'll get into more of that next chapter for sure. So one thing that we need to understand is that opposites are important, especially when dealing with integers. Subtracting negatives moves to the right. Subtracting positives moves to the left on the number line. They're opposites. Make sense? Okay. The same is true when adding and subtracting. One method we can use is switch signs. As long as the first number is the same, we've always talked about the first number is where we start. We don't touch the first number. Okay? We can switch the operations and use the opposite integer. Okay? So yesterday we decided that adding a negative number is the same thing as subtracting a positive, right? And in the example, 4 plus a -3 is 1. And that's the same thing as 4 minus 3. Okay? So in other words, if we wanted to, we could become sign switchers. If you wanted to do the opposite here, you would say, all right, and I haven't seen too many kids do it this way because a lot of kids prefer adding for whatever reason. It's fine. But we could switch these two signs right here. We could say subtract a positive. And you see how it becomes that exact same problem right here? Everybody see that? That's what sign switching does. Or for this problem right here, 4 subtract 3. We could become sign switchers. The first number stays the same. We can add a negative and we get the same answer. Makes sense to everybody? As long as we understand that adding a negative is the same thing as subtracting a positive. You see how they're exact opposites? The same is true with subtracting a negative. We said subtracting a negative, which way do we move in the number line? Right. To the right. What happens when you add a positive? We move to the right. So 4 subtract a -3, that means we're moving 3 units to the right from 4. We end up at 7. 4 plus 3 is 7. So what kids will do, first number always stays the same, plus a +3. As long as we understand that those signs are the same, we can do the sign switching. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay? So we can switch signs to our advantage by following this method. You know, just keep in mind that subtracting a positive, we move to the left, and subtracting a negative, we have to move to the right on a number line. We okay with that? We want to try a few examples? Test it out? So here's what I want you to do. I want you to do on these next examples, I want you to first do the sign switching, and then I want you to go back to method 1. And that method 1 is saying, when we subtract a positive, which way are we going? We subtract a negative, which way are we going? Do your two answers match up? Does this make sense? We okay with that? Are we okay with that? Okay. Go ahead. Sorry. First number has to stay the subtracting a negative is the same thing as? So this is the same thing as 5 plus a positive 3. We should get 8. We okay? And remember, when we subtract negatives, which way do we go? To the right. Okay? Now this one makes it really simple when we do the sign switching. Okay? The first one does, so does the second one. Okay? If we understand that subtracting a positive is the same thing as adding a negative, look at, now all of a sudden our signs become they become the same, right? And what did we say yesterday when the signs are the same and we're adding? What are you afraid that I have this thing on? It's okay. It's okay to be wrong, yeah. Just add them together and keep the signs, right? Just add them together, all right? Negative 8 plus a negative 6 is negative 14. Now, let's talk a little bit about what's going on here, okay? We subtract positives. Which way do we go? We move to the left. We move to the left. We're losing 6 spots, right? We start at negative 8. We're going to move to the left 6 spots. What happens when we add negatives from yesterday? We add negatives. We move to the left. Those are the same things. No matter what, we start at negative 8, and we're moving 6 to the left. Does that make sense to everybody? Hello? Okay, good. All right, subtracting negatives. We said subtracting negatives is the same thing as moving which way? To the right. So that's the same thing as saying negative 6 plus a positive 7. Where do we end up? Positive 1. Okay? Then the same thing here. Subtracting a positive, we would do 5 plus a negative 12. Adding a negative, we move to the... Adding a negative, we move to the left. Adding a negative, we move to the left. Thank you. Thank you. So where are we at? Negative 7. How'd we do? Good. We okay with that? All right. You pick your method. You pick your method, and then when we get done with these next examples, we're going to use the Genius Next Door to determine how we did. Okay? You ready? Okay. Just a little tip for everybody that we talked about earlier. Remember when we talked about opposites? Okay? If you get to a problem, whether it's tonight in your homework, because some of you may not get done with these problems for today. By the way, if you do get done with them, we should be going on to E5. We should be ready for E5 now for IXL. I would highly recommend that you start that, okay? Depending on how we do tomorrow and on this assignment, we'll determine how soon we need to take our test or whether we're ready or not for our test. We could take our test as early as Tuesday of next week. That would be the absolute earliest. That means that all 3 of those IXL assignments would be due at that time. Okay? H7, H6, and E5. Everybody understand that? Okay? We are going to be taking our quiz tomorrow, and that will be the same as what your pretest looked like. It'll just be version 2 rather than version 1. Okay? So here's just a helpful hint and a tip for you. If you forget the rules, go back to the very basic of problems. What is 3 plus 2? 3 plus 2 is what? 5. Okay? We're adding a what? positive. So when we add positives, we know that we move to the right. So that means the opposite must be true when we add a negative number. We have to move to the left because of opposites. Okay? Same thing with subtraction. We've done 4 minus 3 all of our lives. We get 1. What happens when we subtract a positive number? We move to the left. Whoops. I just got a new color. That's pretty cool. All right. So then when we subtract a negative number, it has to do the exact opposite, and it has to move to the right. Everybody see how we can do that? If we get into a little bit of a jam, we can always go back and do that. Can we? We need Chromebooks closed. I know you so badly want to start your assignment, but I want to just go over this real quickly. Okay, subtracting a negative. Let's go right here. Subtracting a negative. Which way are we moving on the number line? We're moving to the right. We start at negative 18. We're going to move to the right. 18, where do we end up? 0. Very good. If you're a sign switcher, it's plus a positive. And bingo, we're right back. Okay? Subtracting a negative again. We move to the right. Okay? Subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding a positive. We should be at a grand total of 46. Okay? Man, we got 3 subtracting negatives right in a row. Remember, the first number always stays the same. We're going to move 9 units to the right. That's what happens when we subtract negatives. We move to the right. Okay? We owe $10, and we're subtracting 9 of those dollars that we owe. How much do we owe? Negative 1. You can add a positive here to make it negative 1. That's sign switching. Okay? Again, subtracting a negative. We're going to move to the right. We can add a positive. We need a grand total of what? Is that 42? How'd you do so far? Good, good, good. All right. Subtracting a positive, we're moving to the left. Okay? Are we going to go past 0 on this one? Yeah, we're going to go past 0. How many units are we going to go past 0? 6. It should be negative 6. All right? Subtracting a positive. Which way are we going on the number line? To the left. How many units are we going to the left? We're going to move 14 to the left. If we start at negative 12, we're going to move 14, right? So now some kids switch this sign, and now it becomes adding the same signs. Add them and keep the sign. It should be negative 26. We go back to subtracting a negative. Subtracting a negative is the opposite of subtracting a positive, so we're going to move to the right. Should be at a grand total of 30. And the same thing with number 14. Subtracting a negative, just like adding a positive. We should be at a grand total of what? Negative 5. Are there any questions on that? Okay, so here's what we need to do. Your assignment's written on the board. I'm going to put it on my web page as well, and I'll write it. I'll write it back there as well. We need to do page 90 and 91, 45 through 55 odd. That needs to be done for tomorrow for your on-time points. And man, you don't want to be one of those kids that don't get it done. These are important ones. How else are you going to know where you're at? Okay? So let's get going on that right now.